Hello everyone, I'm David, nice to see you. Okay, so I'm shambolically underprepared for this, as you can probably tell from the way I'm dressed. I've been ridiculously busy, did a pitch last week, so I haven't really given this much thought. So all the kind of presentations you saw with kind of beautiful art direction and well-crafted metaphors, I don't have any of those, and for that reason I probably will definitely stick to the kind of 6-minute limits, but I can't promise any kind of searing new insight in this, ironically. I kind of originally was told this is a pecha, kucha format, strictly 6 minutes, get on with it. So I thought, okay, so I don't have time to do some gags, but I like to do gags in presentation, so I'm now going to show you the gags I'm not doing. The first gag is, it's pecha, kucha, pecha, ket. Yeah, every time someone does this, there's a gag about, it sounds a bit like pecha, check or whatever. Thought, get that one out of the way. Glad I didn't do that one. The other thing I'm not doing is dictionary definitions, so kind of the insight and then the thing, and it's a noun, and then the dictionary definition, kind of planner's favourite tool. Get 2 or 3 slides in, we'll do a dictionary definition while they're warming up, not doing that. And the other thing I'm not doing actually is brilliant metaphors and analogies. I'm delighted I'm not doing it. Absolutely thrilled because Andy's already done this one and it's hilarious at the time, but I don't have time for that. So, none of that. I'm just literally going to talk about kind of insight from my experience. Obviously, my experience is entirely throughout my career working in media agencies, albeit 3 different ones, and actually how we kind of think about insights from a kind of media agency perspective. And to be honest, to be brutally honest, we spend quite a lot of our time not really worrying about insights in terms of the definition of them and what have you. I'm not necessarily sure we're any the poorer for it. But I worked with a very smart guy who kind of came from an account planning background. Actually, I have to say one of the good things about working in a media agency, genuinely, is you get to work with loads of account planners, because obviously you work on lots of different clients and you get exposed to lots of different account planners and lots of different ad agencies. So that was just playing to the crowd. But he kind of said that actually whatever sort of planning you're doing, actually, it's really simple, this job. You just got to boil it down to 4 things. What's your issue? What's your insight? What's your idea? And what's your implementation? Eyes. And so he kind of liked to condense everything down. I thought, well, that's quite interesting. And clearly you can see the insight there has a very important job there in bridging the gap between the issue and the idea. And you start to get to, this is quite useful, right? Because if I don't have one of those, then I can't necessarily get to a good idea. And you can kind of see its role there in the hierarchy. So I kind of got quite into this. Thought this is a really interesting way of viewing the world. And when I kind of got to kind of PhD, I talked about this. And I also talked, when we kind of wrote up awards papers, or we kind of talked about work retrospectively, we tried to follow this format. And in truth, we kind of found it quite unhelpful because we ended up kind of fetishing the insight and worrying about some of the things that the other speakers have spoken about today. And is it big enough? And is it a breakthrough? And is it really that groundbreaking? Isn't it all a bit obvious? And so we changed what we did. We changed the approach completely. And we went from this approach to something that looked a bit more like this. So the issue became, what's the background? Tell me a story. We merged the idea and the implementation into what we did, and then we added results at the end. It was a good idea. And then essentially we refined the insight as this: why we did what we did. And obviously this is written retrospectively. Let's say, here's the problem: why did we do what we do, and then what we did. And we found it just a really useful way of thinking about an insight. But of course, this is post-rationalized. This is the land of award papers where someone said the truth doesn't matter. Never been more the case. So why we did what we did, and actually, obviously, that's kind of looking back, but obviously, kind of looking forward and looking in the present. Really, for me, this is what the insight is helping us to do. Why are we doing what we are doing? Now, there are many reasons why we're doing what we're doing. Often, it's because of a brilliant kind of creative idea that someone's had, but more often than not, there is a really good logic flow or kind of magic flow that gets you to that point. Why are we doing what we're doing? And very simply, I think that's kind of what we're trying to do when we're getting to an insight. If an insight can help you explain why we're doing what we're doing, then it's a good one. Then the only other thing I was going to talk about is that our host here again at Google, there's a guy who, I forget his name, but he works here, a very smart guy, not him, and he talks about looking for insights as clue hunting. He kind of talked about, you kind of got loads and loads of data, and think about data, and you've got to find all the data, and you've got to look for clues. I thought it's quite exciting. It kind of sounds much more fun, because data sounds quite heavy and boring. Oh God, I've got to mine the data. Think of it as clue hunting, he said, and that's where you're kind of looking for insight within the data. So I can think of clue hunting. I thought I could do that. I could be Sherlock. It's great. And that kind of sounds all very sexy and very interesting, but of course the reality is that most of the time it's fairly obvious who done it, right? Most crimes are committed by the obvious person that, the police get stuff right most of the time, right? And while in terms of, it makes a better story when it's more complex, in reality, it's a bit more boring than that. And I think that's okay, because I think life is boring. There's an insight for you, and I think it's true. I think that's fine. I think probably what we do probably reflects that more often than not. Doesn't mean you can't have a great breakthrough, but I don't think you need to worry if your insight appears to be too obvious at the very beginning. Obviously, the other thing you do in the media agency is you have lots of data. You're surrounded by the stuff. You often underappreciate the stuff that you've got. But of course, when you don't have the stuff, you value it probably a lot more. And we are very fortunate to be kind of surrounded by data through kind of lots of different sources. And very typically, we kind of start there, which is perhaps, again, unsurprising. It doesn't mean you can't have that kind of great big searing insight, but it means that often you're starting to look for clues in the stuff that's most obvious and close to home to you. Now, having said there was no metaphors, Tracy talked about in her campaign column, I'm sure you all read Campaign a couple of weeks ago, fantastic magazine. She talks about West Wing planning. So basically the background to this was, I think Adam Morgan had talked about two types of planning, which was Washington planning, which is all very sensible and very political and very based in fact, and then Hollywood planning, which is more kind of breakthrough and what have you. And Tracy made the brilliant point, I thought, that actually what we're trying to encourage is West Wing planning, that kind of merger of Hollywood and Washington. And that's brilliant. And so I have represented that in a scientific chart for you. Right, so up here is kind of Hollywood planning, Hollywood insight, if you like, kind of human truths, broad stuff, right? This is the kind of stuff that is inherently unarguable. Things like, we are kind of social creatures. We want to be good parents. All that brilliant stuff that we kind of heard about earlier. And then down here, kind of traditionally, the kind of reserve that your media agency start point, I guess traditionally, if you're following stereotypes, is that kind of that more Washington approach, what's etc. I guess all we're saying in terms of the advice that I give to our planners, and this is a brilliant slide build, is to aim roughly there. Okay, so kind of so there's the answer. Right? Don't go out there because you've got the data that kind of helps you down here. Don't stick down here. You keep asking yourself why. Why? But ask yourself why, not till you get up here, but till you get to about there on the chart. So that's essentially what we do, and that is insight at PhD. And to begin at the end at the beginning, that is my very simple answer to the question: what is an insight? It is a thing that tells us why we're doing what we're doing, or did what we did. Thank you.